Welcome to Men Talk Mental Health. I am Venance, and with me, as always, is Ayush. And today we share our bittersweet victories.
About 6 years ago, I ended up getting married, and I committed myself to this one person that I thought I would spend the rest of my life with. We used to joke that we would spend 7 lifetimes together, which is a reference to Indian culture. About 2.5 years ago, actually 3 years ago, we were getting ready to welcome our daughter, and we went through the last 6 years with all these plans. We worked hard. We lived on different continents. We fought through challenges, tribulations, and trials that we never expected. And all of that we did, being partners to each other in the best way possible. When I found out that I was going to be a father, the first thing I did was be afraid of what was to come next. But apart from that, the next thing I did after being extremely afraid and then finally calming down was to obviously be excited and decide that I wanted to be an involved father. I wanted to be there every step of the way for every single thing. And the job that I had at the time didn't allow me to do that. So I left that job and looked for one. I ended up finding one that I didn't know what to expect from, but that I enjoyed. And I set myself a goal saying 5 years from now, this is where I want to be. I walked into that interview saying, this is where I want to be in 5 years. 3 years have passed, and here I am. I've achieved that goal. Now, in the process of achieving the goal, I've lost some things along the way. It's hard to explain how amazing it feels to get to this point in my career, to reach a place that I've wanted to reach, that I've been trying to reach for a while. I set my sights on this goal. I've always been somebody who plans and wants to be successful, obviously. I'm ambitious for sure, but I've also had to sacrifice so much. I never once expected that I would do it in 3, but the kind of person I am, I wanted to do it as quickly as I could. So it feels amazing. Anybody who's made a long-term plan and then been able to achieve it completely understands how amazing this feels when you finally get to the top of the mountain that you've been trying to climb, regardless of the setbacks that you faced, right? But the saddest part of it all is that along the way, I lost that partner. So this moment feels in some ways really hollow, really sad. I can't even think of the word. It's just, as much as I want to pride myself in what I've achieved, I want to share it with the person who I set out on this journey with. The person who supported me through all of this time, the person who I want to celebrate with. But the person isn't here. Or rather, the person doesn't want to be here. Whatever the reason, it doesn't matter. Because what I want is to celebrate with this person. The culmination of all this effort, of all these energies that we've expended, for all the late nights of planning and all the stress and anxiety and worry. And it's difficult to come to terms with the fact that I'm left to do this by myself. So here I stand, having achieved something that I wanted to achieve, unable to share it with the person I want to share it with. And I'm kind of left wondering, where do I go from here? How do I move forward? And it's really bittersweet. I mean, that's why Bittersweet Victories, because I really don't know how to feel about it.
Yeah, I acknowledge, I empathize, I understand. I know what it feels like. In my last relationship, the last conversation that I had with my partner, the last conversation as a couple, I asked her, I joked about it. I said, "Do you have any feedback for me?" And um, and she said, "Well, I think you should invest in yourself." And I agreed, but I did not know what and how. I did not know how I should go about this. And it's it took almost 2 years to arrive at that point, and it's actually thanks to mental health struggles that I arrived at that point where I realized, okay, these are the areas where I need to invest in. And anxiety was the big factor, and then of course I went into therapy. I learned so much about myself. I worked on myself. I did so much of learning even beyond therapy and introspection and deep diving and improving on so many fronts that now I know what it means to invest in myself, and I know what it means to sort of become a better person. And I'm definitely a better partner now more than I was back then. I think I would make for a better partner for sure. But the sad bit is that the person who seeded this idea of investing into myself, of getting into the therapy, is at the peripheries of my life now. We no more hold that space anymore. I cannot share these victories, these triumphs, these wins. It's something that I have to celebrate with myself, and she's the reason why the journey eventually sort of took place. But yeah, it's bittersweet. I think not all victories are like in the movies, you know. There is a tinge of sadness.
At the end of the day, we are all emotive beings. I mean, that's what humans are. That's what makes us unique, I think, is the fact that we are able to acknowledge our emotions. And it's so difficult sometimes to separate your emotions from how you feel versus how you should feel versus how you want to feel. And that is what can make a great victory so undervalued sometimes in your state of mind. It's really difficult, honestly, to be able to really accept what you have done and then accept the place that you're in simply because your emotions tell you otherwise, even though they should be telling you one thing. So you have this happiness of finding something that you've been fighting for so long, and then on the flip side of it, you're just unable to accept that you've done it, but also the person you want to share it with is not there. And this doesn't necessarily mean it's only relationship based, right? Because it could be a promise you made to a parent who's no longer with us. It could be a grandparent. It applies to so many different forms of loss, because that's what it comes down to at the end of the day. The loss of that person that you started the journey for or with. I mean, at the end of the day, you started the journey for yourself, but very often we do things for other people or with the inspiration of other people who mean something to us. And when they're no longer there, it's hard to accept that. But getting to a place of acceptance is key, because otherwise you're never going to be able to give yourself credit for the things that you've achieved. And like you, my journey was forced upon me through a relationship. But also, what differentiates us is that I was like thrown into it. I was blindsided by it. I didn't even know it was a journey. You know, I just got like, boom. You don't see what's coming, blindsided. And I had no clue. And we've talked about this multiple times about having an end goal, talking about how thinking about the end of the journey is what gives you more anxiety, and sometimes all you can do is take a look at the 10 steps in front of you and just get through those 10 steps. And I always told you that I'm always the kind of person who envisions the winning moment and plays that over and over again. That's how I deal with my pressures. But I've also learned so much from your story of how your your travels and your experience of travels, about how sometimes you don't have to envision the final step. All you have to do is just look at the steps that are right in front of you and take those first, and the journey will automatically reveal itself as you keep going. And that's a great way to understand acceptance. And doing that, kind of taking that one step at a time, allows you to slowly but surely accept yourself and give yourself credit for what you have achieved, regardless. Because at the end of the day, your achievement is still an achievement, even if you can't share it with the person that you want to share it with. Accepting that something has ended, accepting what you have done, acceptance is key here. And once you can find acceptance, you will be able to grow. You'll be able to accept and understand and overcome your own shortcomings. You'll be able to deal with your own addictions. And that's the biggest thing with addictions, right? You have to first accept that you have one. Mental health is very similar in that respect, because you have to accept that you have a mental health issue. You have to accept what your issues are with regards to mental health, whatever they may be. And maybe issue is not the right word. Maybe I'm not being very PC, but that's just how I'm describing it in my emotional state. In order to get through your journey, you really have to be able to accept. And the role of acceptance is something that most people will negate or forget or just pass by. They'll think that, of course, I'm accepting it, but it's very easy to blame so many other people along the way and not blame yourself, or not accept responsibility and be accountable for yourself. And the mental health process and the mental health journey is a bittersweet victory in its own right, because you're constantly being thrown for a loop. You're constantly taking one step forward, two step backwards kind of situations, where you'll make a breakthrough on something only to find that there's actually a whole new problem that you never knew before, because you've solved this one, but now a new one has arrived. And then you have to sort through that. And then you're like, oh, wait, but actually, no, this person caused that problem. Or that's because of my childhood. Or, but that's because of my this. And it's so easy to be like, oh, yeah, it's not me, it's that. But it is you. Yes, we are products of our environment. Yes, we are products of our childhood. Yes, we are products of nature versus nurture and all of that. But at the end of the day, you are still you. You are an adult. You are living your life right now. Your victories are yours to own and celebrate, and your choices are yours to live by, whatever they may be. Acceptance is key. You have to accept responsibility for the things you do. Pat yourself on the back when you've done well, because you've earned it. Nobody else has. And when you mess up or you have difficulties, don't be hard on yourself. Accept that you're a human being. It's okay. It's all about how we get up once we fall, because everybody falls. I just think that it's really easy to forget how important it is to accept whatever it is that's coming your way. And that's why this victory for me feels bittersweet, because I'm unable to accept at some level that I can't share it with this person. But I can also realize and I can see that I'm not accepting it. I'm cognizant of it. And that's what's helping me work through it.
Yeah, yeah, I agree with you completely. And going back to the point about accepting mental illness, yeah, that is the first step. Or accepting any challenge, or difficulty, frame of mind. It is the first step, but it's also important to remind yourself that you are not the problem, in the sense that you are not only defined by your mental illness or your challenge or your problem. It is an aspect of your life right now or back then, and you definitely have to take full accountability and work on it, but it is not all of you. There are other facets to your life, to your personality, to your being. And yes, the environment and external factors do play a big role. They play a huge role at times, and very often. But how you respond to it really matters. And this goes back to something that, so you introduced me to Stoicism, as a philosophy very early on in the pandemic. And one of the teachings is that, and I'm not just going to say it exactly like the quote is, and I can't remember whose quote it is exactly, but it's one of the Stoic greats, which is, whatever situation you are in, just treat it like it was always meant to be like that, and accept it and take it from there. The more resistance that you have, the more you ask yourself, why am I in this situation? What have I done to deserve this, etc. It's fine in the beginning to go through that process. I think it's absolutely fine. I think it's natural. I think it's human. But after a point, you have the choice to respond in a particular way. And you could respond by getting help. You could respond by drawing boundaries. You could respond by stepping away, moving away from the factor that is causing harm and destruction. And mind you, sometimes it's not easy to move away from people or situations that are causing you harm. I mean, your rational mind is like, yeah, okay, this is destroying me. This is absolute pain and suffering and misery, but you're still in that situation. Sometimes it's sort of a codependency. It takes a lot of courage to finally make that step out. Yeah, so I think it's important to accept, but know that it's whatever the shortcoming is, or whatever the struggle is, whatever the challenge is, whatever the mental illness is that it's a part of you. It's not all of you.
There is probably not much that we've said in the past that is more true than that statement. I think mental illness does not define you unless you let it. And I know that's the thing with mental illness, right? It's how do you differentiate? How do you yourself differentiate yourself from it? And that's what makes it so difficult sometimes. But there are resources, there's help, and there is a lot that you can do to be the difference. And it's not easy. It's definitely not easy. But use all the resources you can, and take all the help you can. And I think there are many examples that you can find throughout life, books, stories of other humans who've been able to overcome it. And going back to something I can remember myself, I think, is you, Venance. I think you, at the beginning of the pandemic, had a situation where you were laid off in a difficult time when we had no clue what was going to happen. It was an unprecedented situation, and you had to kind of start your life from scratch, making huge, big, difficult decisions. And you were completely impacted by all these things that were out of your control. But you were able to come through it, and here you are today on the podcast
Yeah.
with me in a much different state. But I think it's something that you did so amazingly well, and I think this is a great example for everyone to hear.
Yeah, it was tough. It's definitely tough. I have spoken about it in the previous episodes, but yeah, I got laid off pretty early on in the pandemic, and it was a shock layoff. I think there's a part of me that's saying, is it going to be me? Is it, I was wondering, and then the email came through, and yeah, I remember just breaking down, because the email didn't really say I was getting laid off, but it said that there's going to be a call the next day, and it was sad, and it broke my heart, because not so much about the job. I liked what I did, there was no doubt about it, but it was about letting go of all those people, those friendships, those relationships that I built over 3 years. Really, me, man. I kind of give my work everything that I have, all of me. It's never half. It's always the full version of myself at my workplace. And I met some amazing people, and I think the sadness was that I don't get to work with them, speak. I mean, I can speak to them obviously, but it's never going to be the same. And over time, going back into the job market, it was a very difficult job market because of the millions of people that were laid off. All I got for like 7 months were rejections. And I know I got laid off not because of my performance, but because of because of the pandemic and its effect on business. But after a point, there's a little thing in your head, and you start asking yourself, "Hey, man, maybe you were not like good enough," or uh, these little things that start creeping in. And when the rejections come in through the job interview process, then that voice gets a little louder. And I realized that, okay, you know what, I need to go back to the drawing board, and I definitely needed to upskill. I was aware of that. I started slowly upskilling. I started working for free. I technically was interning, and an unpaid internship after 13 years of being a professional of paid work. I reached this point after the last rejection. I think that the last rejection, which was in the beginning of Jan, I was like, okay, man, I'm done. Nobody's going to reject me again because I'm not going to apply.
Yeah, man. Self-doubt is real.
Yeah. And no, absolutely. And then I started with the unpaid internship, which was also part of the upskilling process. And then from there, I went on to sort of a paid module, and then got onto a short-term retainer, and then eventually now I'm an independent marketing consultant with a client on a retainer. And I'm probably not going to go back to a job for a while now because I think I've found, in a way, thanks to all that rejection, I found something that is very fulfilling. But yeah, it's although, like, I would say this feels like a good time, and this is definitely a victorious time in many ways. I don't have those people around me to celebrate it with, those colleagues and friends who had become a part of my life, and we were winning things together. And after sort of the lowest part of my life, lowest part of my career, I would also say I'm victorious now, but I'm victorious in a very solitary fashion. You know, I do have my close friends and my family and you who've celebrated my wins, but definitely it's there's still a sense of loneliness to it, and bittersweet for sure, because the victories have come after a lot of pain and suffering.
It's like always, man. Our stories are so parallel, and you know just as well as I do that we've been through the last 18 months in a similar fashion. Victories have come, but they've been very, very hard fought. We've been bombarded from all sides with all sorts of issues. Mental health has been only one of them, but there have been so many others. But it takes me back to the idea we were talking about a few minutes ago about acceptance, and there was no way you were gonna move forward without accepting your situation. And I know that point came at some point because you resisted it initially, and eventually it just became something that just became part of you. And I know you've seen it in me as well. Recently there's an acceptance of what your situation is, and there's almost a fuck it attitude to it after a certain point. But that fuck it attitude is part of the grieving process of acceptance, and it's part of letting go of some of that past emotions, past some of those past feelings, and it allows you to step forward and step ahead. And it's important to remain humble in all those experiences because the journey you've been through does humble you constantly. It destroys your ego. It makes you face self-doubt. It makes you question yourself, which is why people keep talking about this idea of I've discovered myself, or I've had a journey that has taught me so much about myself, because that's what it's done, right? Over the last 18 months you were laid off and you've come to a whole different place. Yes, it's bittersweet, but the pandemic is technically still on. And had the pandemic disappeared completely, would you necessarily be feeling the same way? Maybe not. Maybe you would. Who knows? It's a branch we don't know. It's a branch of life that we don't know what would have happened if you had traveled on. And that's constantly another part of I think our mental states that we agonize about constantly, is the what ifs of life, of what if we had done this at that point, or what if we had done that, what would that branch of our life tree look like, and where would we be standing now if it weren't for that. But to not go too deep into that tangent, I think in the process of what you were able to do, you were able to find acceptance of your situation. You were able to find acceptance of where you were and what was blocking you from moving forward. Upskill is something you mentioned. Um, I know you changed tactics in the way you were approaching jobs. You used the things that you knew would help you move forward, and you were able to change your perspective and have perspective as well. And all of that only came because of you being able to accept where you were first and foremost. Because you don't get to reinvent yourself and restart your life without accepting that that is required in the first place.
Hmm.
If you think your life is going just fine, why would you do anything? You wouldn't change it, right? It makes no sense. Why would you go about a journey to change yourself if you think everything is hunky dory?
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
the problem is a lot of people will not accept it because they are blaming everything else but yourself. And I'm not saying blame is the right word here, but you're just not willing to take on the responsibility of you are the one who has to change your own life, and you were able to do it. You did it fantastically. I mean, right now, if I were to say it, you're balling, bro. I mean, you're you're you get to go out for mini vacations, and you're able to spend on yourself, and you're able to treat yourself to well deserved, well earned time that you've earned based on the hard work that you've put in. And even that was a process that you were able to get through acceptance, which was being able to accept that it's okay to spend on myself a little bit, to spend because I've earned it, I deserve it to some extent. And that's a huge step for someone like you and someone like me, where to treat ourselves when we are in a negative situation is difficult because it's easy for us to be hard on ourselves. And I think it's
Hmm.
easy for most people to be hard on themselves. But sometimes you have to remember that you need a break too. So give yourself a break. In in retrospect, I think that there's a lot of sadness to a lot of the victories for different reasons. But we have to keep pushing forward. We have to keep driving forward. Otherwise, we it's very easy to just give up and quit. And then what? We're left with nothing. We're left standing nowhere. If everybody decides to quit, then where do you go from there, right? I never had that choice. I have a daughter that I have to keep fighting for. And honestly, I don't want to quit. And neither did you. Regardless of the fact that you said, you know what, no one's going to reject me because I ain't applying anymore. You stuck to that technically, but you are still working. You have a job. You reinvented yourself. And you were able to keep pushing on. You were able to keep driving forward. I mean, we referenced how stories are not like the movies, but I can think of a famous line from a famous movie. I think it was Sylvester Stallone in Rocky that says it's not about how many punches you can take, but it's about how many punches you can take and keep punching back. And it's true. Everybody gets punched a lot, just not literally. Sometimes you get punched like literally too, I guess, if you're an MMA fighter or something like that. But regardless, you got to keep punching back. You got to keep moving forward. And it doesn't matter how many bumps in the road come. It doesn't matter how often you feel let down or you feel broken. Keep setting those goals. Keep looking for the new victories. Keep looking for the next victory. Even if it feels too far away, even if it feels like you may not get there, just set it. Set the goal board. Create a vision board. Just keep your sights forward. Don't get in the space of reminiscing on the past and trying to agonize about what could have been done better, because you can't do it better in the past, but you can do it better in the future. And you can definitely do it better in the present. So stay in the present, keep taking those steps, because bumps will keep coming. And no matter what you do, if you can accept your situation, you, like Venance and like me, will be able to rise from the ashes once again like a phoenix.
The big shift for me personally was to move from a victim mindset to that of I will take charge, I will accept, and I will respond, and I will take charge. One way of looking at it is a fixed mindset to a growth mindset. That was like the big shift. But when I look at like the previous versions of myself, definitely something that I've learned from my surroundings and the people around me um, is to be a victim to your circumstances and then kind of like leave it at that. And you think, okay, you know what, it's just happened to me, and and then there's a little bit of self-pity and asking for pity from people around you, which is also I used to do it because there was a little bit of that, that little bit of that attention that you get also through like being a victim. But when you change that narrative in your head to that of being the protagonist, the hero of your story, it makes a huge difference. And when you then become the hero of this story, when you're the action doer, you're changing your mindset to that of growth, to that of moving forward. And going back to what you said earlier, I think acceptance is the first step. I think even just before acceptance is awareness. So awareness, acceptance, and then acting upon it in a way which is good for yourself, not causing anyone else harm, but which is good for yourself. I believe that's the way. I think that's the way to sort of, I think, maybe could be the blueprint for dealing with any difficulty in our lives.
Yeah, that sounds like a great blueprint, and I think we both acknowledge that everybody's situations are different, and that blueprint may apply to you differently, but it's just one way to go ahead and try to change the circumstances in your life if that's what you want to do. That's what you feel like needs to be done. But that being said, this has been a great episode. I think emotional for the both of us, and hopefully you guys feel the same. Moving forward, we have a great bunch of episodes coming up over the next few weeks, and we are so thankful for all the support and love that we have received from all our listeners. Thank you for being on the journey with us. Please continue to give us your feedback and any opinions that you have. I have not deleted any emails from the inbox, I promise. We listen and read to every single one, and we incorporate all the feedback that we get wherever it comes from, and we do our best. So thank you so much. But for now, we're going to let this one go. Here's Reese with the Men Talk Mental Health soundtrack. So next up, maybe we should do an episode on emotional intelligence. What do you think?
I think there's some time for that. We'll definitely get to it. Yeah.
How about, I was thinking about toxicity and toxic people. That's something I really want to cover.
Very important. Very important. I don't know if it's the next one though.
What about anger? Because, anger.
Yeah. Soon. I think anger is soon. I think the next one... What should the next one be?
You want to do an episode on family and being a caregiver?
Yeah, let's do that. I think it's a very pertinent part of my life right now, and definitely is and was a pertinent part of your life. I think being a caretaker to people with mental illness or any other kind of challenges is not easy, and it kind of takes a toll on the caregiver itself, and I don't think it's spoken about enough.
Okay. So emotional intelligence it is.
All right, caregivers. That's the next one.